listening to Character Crusade.
This is Character Crusade, Skyrim Workshop. I'm Stu.
And I'm Joe.
And I'm Matt.
And this is episode 48. Yes, this is episode 48 of Skyrim Roleplay Workshop. Tonight, our topic is inspiration versus game mechanics. And this topic came up because of an email that we got from a listener who had some questions, was looking for some advice, and we thought, hey, why not? Let's share it with everybody and use it as our topic for tonight because it's something that we all struggle with. Mm-hmm. So I think what we're going to do is start out by having Joe kind of go over the email, hit the high points so we kind of understand what the question is, and then we're going to talk it through and see what comes of the conversation. Just a few housekeeping things. We're not going to be doing an announcement segment on this podcast anymore. We will do an announcement segment if there's something extra special we need to cover, but for the most part, I'm going to try to do a monthly channel update that will include anything that we want to put in here. We're trying to just be judicious with our time because the goal here is that we want to try and keep the Skyrim Roleplay Workshop podcast within a 45 to 60 minute time box because we have Thomas is coming in to join us in less than an hour, and then we're going to set up for our Tabletop RPG live stream. So that is what we have in store. So we're going to go here for about 45 minutes or so. Then we're going to put a pause on the stream, and we're going to reset the table and all that stuff so that we can play Pathfinder. That is the plan, anyway.
Excellent.
Okay, so I think with that in mind, if you have any questions about recent updates, there's a lot of information in a channel update that I released today that has to do with anything going on with Panic Monk, with CouchWarrior TV, and also with the podcast. So without further ado, Joe, do you want to go through the email for us, and then that'll kind of set the stage for our conversation?
Sure. Okay, so this came from Zephyr, and I'm just going to kind of read through what he's got here.
Zephyr writes.
He or she, I guess.
Yes.
Zephyr
this
writes.
Just in from Zephyr.
In the course of playing, I've noticed my character ideas fitting into three categories according to inspiration. Aesthetic, from styles within the game to images and music outside of it. Gameplay, from a certain item, skill, quest, etc. And roleplay, purely character-driven ideas. There can be overlap, of course. For instance, aesthetic and gameplay inspiration of the Stendarr's Aurora. We're going to go with Aurora.
That's what we're going with today.
From Disney.
Stendarr's Aura spell.
Okay. Gotcha.
So that's kind of the background, I guess, or the lead-in. So the question is, relating to the first category of aesthetic inspiration, which has been tricky to develop, especially when it comes to the Forsworn. I love their juxtaposition of a very earthy style with some magic and find their practices intriguing, but there's not much one can do with them in-game. Forsworn faction quest mods are buggy, and I feel the alternate start option makes entering Markarth an issue because, of course, it puts you at odds with pretty much everyone because it's Forsworn.
Right.
So Zephyr is asking if we have any ideas how to develop such a character.
Right.
Can
Well-
I ask a little ahead question?
Yeah,
I tried
please.
to catch up on quite a bit
Please.
of the Forsworn because
Let's
I
do that.
haven't been in that part of Skyrim up in the Reach. So maybe for maybe a minute or so, give me a little. What do I need to know about the Forsworn before we start talking about how to play that way?
Well, there's what do we need to know about the Forsworn, mechanically speaking, and then culturally speaking, right?
Can we start culturally speaking?
Yeah.
Real brief.
Sure. I mean, they're basically kind of a group of zealous revolutionaries in a way, but the idea is that what they're doing is they're trying to take back the Reach. They believe that the Reach has been taken away from them. If you look at the lore, there are some significant there's some significance to the origin of the Reachmen is being this kind of interesting amalgam of both Bretons and Nords. That's why typically you see a lot of Breton Forsworn and some Nord Forsworn. I mean, you don't see Elven races as Forsworn, stuff like that. So there's a lot of history there that one could look at.
And I think too, I think the Forsworn in their early stages were the ones who kind of moved into Markarth when it was abandoned, when the Dwemer left. So they were kind of the early inhabitants of that city until the Imperial came through, or the Elvins. The Elven race.
Yeah, and my understanding is there is a technical difference between Reachmen and Forsworn. The Forsworn, I think, is representative of a kind of a group of Reachmen who've decided that revolution is the way to take this back. So, in the same way that you might say that there's a difference between a group of people who live in a country versus a group of people who live in a country who have become militaristic, right, or something like that. And then there are the interesting thing about the Forsworn too is that there are some kind of cult-like undertones to what they're doing as well. And my impression when playing the game and looking at the lore was always that it had not always been that way, but that the Forsworn had become more of a cult with the involvement of the Hag Ravens and stuff like that. That was not always the case.
Sure.
At one point, they were kind of like a guerrilla group, and then at another point, then you got this sort of cult-like thing going on,
sort of
with the
overtones.
strange magic and stuff like that, right?
There's actually a good analogy in the chat here that's kind of compares or likens the Forsworn to kind of a Celtic history or heritage versus the Nordic Viking. So there's kind of a different flavors of a similar region.
Right.
Thanks
And
for
I
the
think that's
background.
actually a really good analogy.
Yeah, I think it is.
Kind of that druidic, earthy.
I think it is, and I think it plays into it plays into how the Forsworn are approached in a lot of different ways in the game. Their style of fighting, right? You don't see a lot of Forsworn that are hefting shields. Do you see any? I mean, really, they're
dual wielders.
They're charging into battle, lightly armored, with basically homemade weapons, and they're concerned about dealing as much damage as possible, and it kind of brings about those images of the shirtless Viking charging against armored warriors, right? Like the sort of insanity of the idea, but that they're so filled with zeal and lust that it doesn't matter to them.
So do we have any Forsworn berserkers?
I don't know. I
I'm
guess
sure that there probably are, right? I mean, there's got to be somebody that zealous. And so I guess my thought was, is as we were talking about the background and what these characters, all of them. That's what Forsworn means, is berserker.
It's native for berserker.
I just wanted to get a little bit of a background because like I was mentioning, I haven't been to that part of Skyrim, haven't been into the Reach, I haven't interacted with any Forsworn in my own games. So
go and actually give. I think you could give the passage another cursory view, since that's where it starts out at. And
But I mean, in my own games, I haven't
right. But
encountered
if you
any
want to get a
Forsworn, so-
feel for kind of
The
what
Forsworn.
they're all about and kind of what they're like, they give you kind of a heads up what you're in for.
I will do
Because
that.
they can be difficult.
Yes, they can. And I think the first part of the email is would be a good thing for us to address, just because generally, I mean, people get inspiration from different things. I like the way that
This is a
Zephyr
good breakdown.
kind of categorize them in a way to sort of boil them down in a way that makes sense to a lot of people.
Right.
I think regardless of where you take your inspiration for a character or a playthrough from, most often it would probably be able to fit into one of those three categories anyway.
Right.
So I know that he wanted to address specifically the first one, this
The
idea of the
aesthetics.
aesthetics.
Right.
But I think these are categories that just could apply generally to just about everyone. So I thought that was kind of a cool
Right.
idea.
Right.
The Forsworn are difficult as far as they're all over the Reach. There's a lot of encounters with them, but even in those instances, the one instance in the vanilla game where you have an opportunity to join their side, it's only in a partial way.
Very temporary. Well,
It's-
not temporary, but very Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yes. So there, I can understand the frustration, right? It's almost as if you're part of a faction of the organization.
Right.
And this played very heavily into the way that I structured the passage. I didn't take advantage of this idea. I didn't have, my character Etienne, he did not join the Forsworn, but I was cognizant of this idea that when you go and you complete the quest down in Sidna Mine and you break out of the prison, if you choose to join the Forsworn there, you become, in essence, a friend of the Forsworn leader. But despite the fact that you're a friend of the Forsworn leader, you're only able to ever get into one Forsworn camp,
Right.
without being attacked.
Yeah, otherwise,
Any other
everywhere
Forsworn
else.
camp you go into, you
All
get
bets are
attacked.
Right.
So, as I was thinking through my strategy
Very
for that
closed
story,
society.
I was thinking maybe this is an organization that's not so much of an organization. It's a bunch of detached tribes that have roughly the same ideology but are warring with one another. And in my mind, what that meant was, when I set up my story, I set it up in such a way that I kind of automatically divided the Forsworn into two factions. The faction that is sort of the legacy faction, where they're militaristic and they're about taking over the Reach by military force, and the faction that has been sort of perverted and turned into a cult by the Hagravens. And I sort of imagined them being opposed to one another. It ended up not being as much of a factor for me,
Sure.
but I can understand if you have a character where you want to actually have them join the Forsworn, you could use something like that to say the Forsworn is an organization that is divided.
Right. To
know.
be able to explain that relationship of why
Right.
you're attacked one area but not another.
Right. And it might also explain why, despite the fact that the hills are crawling with Forsworn, they still cannot manage to take Markarth back,
Right.
because they're so consumed with infighting that they
Right,
can't get
right.
organized enough to take
To
back the
mount
city.
a meaningful.
Yeah.
Right. So, I definitely understand the
way.
struggle. I'm assuming that the reference to mods being buggy just might be a reference to alternate start,
No, actually,
or not.
that
Or is there an example?
no, there's nothing specific. Well, Forsworn faction quest mods, so it would be mods specifically geared for Forsworn
Oh, okay.
outside of alternate
Faction
start.
quests.
So
I've not had any experience with those myself.
I have not either, but I can imagine there's a lot of complexity under the hood that
Right.
causes some
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah.
So that doesn't surprise me that there would be. And
Yep.
they did denote that, at least in Legacy Skyrim. So who knows? Maybe in SE, if there are some out there, they're a little more solid. It's hard to say.
It's possible.
I know they mentioned alternate start. Another option could be, if you're doing mods, Skyrim Unbound, which allows you to put yourself in the factions. Now, again, you're going to run into this problem of all of a sudden now everyone's pitted against you. Of course, you're going to have the issues of getting into Markarth, but I believe I'm using Skyrim Unbound, but I haven't looked at the Forsworn or anything like that part of it. But I believe you can go into the MCM menu and kind of decouple yourself, so kind of reset.
Okay.
So at some point when it makes sense in your story or your gameplay, you can pull yourself out of that faction.
Right. Now, the other option, I like the idea, right?
I'm not sure, but I think so.
Of somebody being in the Forsworn and the fact that they're in that faction making them everybody's enemy. I mean, to me, that seems like a really interesting way to play.
And that's exactly what I was just thinking. I mean, all you're doing is turning everybody against everybody.
Yeah, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah.
I mean, really. So maybe at that point, the emphasis is not on trying to figure out how to circumvent these difficulties presented by the faction question, but how to introduce other mods that allow you to deal with the faction question, right? So introducing mods like Hidden Hideout City Edition, which allows you to sneak into a city, for example. Using mods like Ordinator that allow you to really target how you spend points on stealth, creating a stealthy character who's a Forsworn, all about infiltrating, right?
Is there is that an Ordinator or Percus? I don't remember which one. That if you can get high enough in one of the trees that if you're clad in all of the gear, is that Ordinator?
That, I believe that is an Ordinator. That's an Ordinator perk. However, I know that there is a specific mod that will allow you to wear disguises.
Okay.
So you could wear a disguise of,
So
say, a Markarth guard, and you can
everyone
walk
will
in.
treat you as if you're a Markarth guard. So.
See, again, that's another way to do it.
So let me ask, to sort of get back to the cultural piece. Would down and dirty Forsworn worry about that? I'm trying to sort of understand again some of the game mechanic again, because
I think it depends.
Like you wouldn't want to pick Forsworn followers, right? You'd cause
Well.
some big but I'm just thinking about if you're trying to get in and play a character as a Forsworn, you would have to do something like that. Otherwise, it would be a very short game, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't believe that in the vanilla game there's anybody that's part of the Forsworn faction that you can make into a follower. If you were to use something like AFT to turn a Forsworn person into a follower, under the hood, it's going to switch them to your faction. That's what it's going to do.
So everyone else will react to them as they would you.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So
okay. So, but I mean, that to me, that doesn't stop you from role playing that, right? I mean, one of the things that I think is interesting about the Forsworn is when you go through the Sidna Mine thing, that gives you a very strong indication of how, at least at the top of the organization, an organization is in air quotes here because it's used loosely where I think the Forsworn are concerned. There's some intelligence there, right? There's some craftiness. There's some spying going on.
Oh, yeah.
They've got Forsworn who are like the equivalent of suicide commandos who have infiltrated the city at different levels of government and stuff. So there's a level of sophistication there that I think would allow you to do something like have a character who is all about infiltrating cities in an intelligent and secret way, right? That would fit, right? I think it would. That's another reason why when I was playing Etienne, in my mind, I had this mental vision of them being an organization divided. One that's more militaristic and based on spycraft, and one that is so over the top, cult-like, and zealous that they can't be reasoned with. And their objective is to just charge in with magic and axes and try to overpower the enemy through numbers and slaughter. Yeah. Right? It's a very different kind of approach. It's sort of I don't know what you'd call it, sort of the chaotic neutral approach to the neutral approach, right? Or something like that. But I don't know. I'm thinking for Zephyr, what Zephyr would need to do is figure out what's the base mod that I'm going to use to make myself part of this faction, and then from there start cherry picking the things that I think I'm going to need as set pieces to really make it work.
I mean, it is possible to do all this through the console too, but I guess
Right.
personally, I try to avoid altering too much in game via console because I just don't know what kind of broad ramifications that
True.
could have. It's one reason why you don't like to
Yeah.
progress your quests because
There's a certain amount of risk.
yeah,
there.
at some point your game just takes a big dump and you're done.
Yep.
But it is an option if you want to look up console commands and get some detail on what they can do for you. But I always feel a little safer if there's a mod out there because that means the author has actually done some work
Some
with
research.
Hopefully, yeah.
it. Hopefully.
Right.
It's not always the case.
Trusted mod author. But
Right.
yeah, again, I don't know if that's I don't know what's available via SE.
Yeah.
Not nearly as much at this point, but it is growing by leaps and bounds. And I know when SKSE comes available, it's just going to skyrocket.
It will. It will. So I don't know what you guys think, but that's my solution, right? Figure out what your tool of choice is at the beginning to put yourself in that faction, but then think about the type of character you want to play. And if you want to play a Forsworn character who's all about disguises and spycraft, I think that could work. I think that could work really well if you select the right companion mods to go with it. I think where you're going to have the more difficult time is if you want to create a character who's more of a warrior, like a true Forsworn type warrior, where you're not going to focus as much on stealth and stuff. You're gonna have to try and come up with some means by which you can kind of fudge a few things.
Right.
I don't know.
And I guess too, it depends on, if you want to play this character as, that devout Forsworn or
Right.
the Forsworn that is, leaving, going AWOL, if you will.
Yeah.
The more cult-like Forsworn, perhaps.
Perhaps.
I don't know.
Which seems to be more of what you would run into normally, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because if you look at it, I feel like the Forsworn are interesting. I mean, most of the major Forsworn camps, we saw this in the passage, have at least one Briarheart present.
Right.
And many, many of them have a Hagraven present, which to me suggests that this sort of cult-like approach to what the Forsworn are is winning out
Right.
in whatever this internal struggle is. However, there are a few camps where there is no Hagraven present and there is only a Briarheart. The Briarheart is essentially the boss of that camp, right? The very first Forsworn camp that Etienne encountered was a camp where the boss was basically a Briarheart. There was no Hagraven. And the interesting thing about that location is that in all the other locations on the map, when you saw a Briarheart being created, it was a Hagraven creating a Briarheart.
True.
Except for this camp. It was a Briarheart attempting to create another Briarheart, which was really interesting to me.
Oh, yeah.
Almost as if they split off from the Hagravens and had a complete agenda of their own. Like, here we got a third faction forming, right? Of Briarhearts who don't want anything to do with the Hagravens, but want to create their own army somehow using the Briarheart magic, right? So, to me, having done the whole passage thing and really dug into it, I just feel like there really is a lot of interesting, intriguing things that a person could latch on to. Obviously, my approach was to be opposed to the Forsworn. I wasn't looking at it kind of from the same angle that Zephyr is suggesting, but
trying to become part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Has the idea of playing a character style like a Briarheart warrior or caster ever appealed to either of you guys? That style of play?
Not me, because I didn't know about them.
No.
But it seems like an interesting way to try to do a role play, because it would be very, very hard to find what we would typically think of as success in the game in the same way. If the approach was to introduce as much chaos as possible, with the
Right.
idea behind turning everyone against each other
Yeah,
in
I
order to
hadn't-
get Skyrim back.
I
That would be
hadn't-
kind of fun.
I've never really given
Yeah.
it much thought, to be honest, but I think it could be a really interesting playthrough. I'm not sure if I would take it from the kind of the Forsworn trying to leave the cult or the way of life, or
Trying to rejoin the Nords, for example. Is that what you're talking about, or something else?
Yeah, well, no, yeah, exactly that. Basically just distancing themselves, but that's what they know, so that's basically what they are. Or
Born a Forsworn, now trying to get away.
or if I would go more for that, just trying to instill as much chaos and havoc as possible.
Right.
You need 2 playthroughs, one
One for each.
for each, and you can sort of see
Right,
the
right.
mirror image of what's happening.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, Spiritica Starbreeze makes an interesting point that Tamriel Vault has an interesting Forsworn build called Raven, Lady of the Reach, and it covers both mods and vanilla roleplay. That is absolutely true, and we have done a video on that for Tamriel Vault. It is called Skyrim Character Build, Raven, Lady of the Reach.
I thought that sounded awfully
Yep.
familiar.
We did kind of a review of that character build a while back. So if you want to check it out, I would encourage you to do that. That'll give you just a really quick and dirty synopsis of
Sure.
what the build is like.
Yeah, that's a great place to start.
And if I remember correctly, that build was based heavily on the idea of spycraft and stealth.
Yeah, I think
Those
you're right.
those
I think
kinds
you're
of
right.
things.
Yep.
Heavy use of the bow, dual wielder.
Yeah, it was
all that stuff, and it has a good series of suggestions for what armor and equipment and stuff like that is available in the vanilla game that you could use to supplement the character.
Yeah, I remember a lot of the gear of the old gods was part of that.
Yep.
So it kind of lays out some of the quests you could partake in and choose to do.
Yeah.
Building up and getting this gear and that kind of stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, you can console yourself whatever, but
It was, I think, the second or maybe the second build that we covered in that series. Granted, we didn't do too many in that
do very many,
series,
but-
but it was the second one that we covered. So, I mean, it was very popular, and there was kind of some interesting and surprising things. It was very role play focused character build.
Well, I'm going to go watch it again because it was obviously long enough ago that I haven't.
yeah, it's been a little while now. So,
I think what I like about the concept, though, around this Raven of the Reach, Lady Raven of the Reach, right? And this I suppose could work in vanilla as well. It's more about a mindset to say, rather than worrying so much that I'm part of a faction or not part of a faction, focus on the infighting within the Forsworn and say that your character is on a mission to basically change the Forsworn as an organization, and the player character is their own faction. The player character is their own faction, and they're trying
first
to
of a new one?
They're trying to patient zero.
Patience.
Patient zero in the Forsworn Revolution, this
There you
internal conflict, right? Where your character is the one who's decided that maybe this Hag Raven stuff is a perversion of what the organization should be, and you're gonna turn against it, or
right, they've
vice
lost their way
versa,
from the
whatever.
old gods, and
Exactly.
I'm going to set it straight.
Exactly. And when you think about it, the whole side quest that you go through with Melka, the cool thing about Melka is once you help out Melka, she is the only Hag Raven in the game who will be friendly to you,
yeah,
right? The other cool thing is that once you clear out the area where Melka lives, it never gets repopulated with bad guys. It
Really?
is always empty,
she
which
must
means
make sure it stays clean.
yes, which means you could make it into a base
Yeah.
for whatever faction it is you're
Sure.
going to create. And if you use something like AFT, where you can have multiple followers, now you acquire multiple followers and you dress them as Forsworn if you want to, and you turn them into your own little revolutionary band, and you go out and you try to deal with the more cult-like factions within your organization, stuff like that. I mean, to me, that seems like it'd be a really interesting approach, and most of it you could accomplish, I think, with a vanilla game.
A lot of it, for sure.
I mean,
Depends if you want to add a little flavor.
Right.
yeah,
And that gets back to your point of, how do you want to do this?
yeah, exactly. I think that it's so cool because of all the stuff that's going on with the Forsworn, it just makes the Reach as a region ripe for that kind of focused role play. That's why I decided to focus on it. When I wanted to create a campaign that was sort of geographically focused, I couldn't think of anywhere else in Skyrim where there was more to do if I was just going to focus on a single insulated story inside of a particular place. And I mean, that's what ended up happening. And it was 42 episodes worth of adventuring just within the
Right.
Reach, never leaving the Reach, really. I
Yeah.
don't think he ever left the Reach until after episode 42.
I mean, that
So
by far is the most I have ever seen of the Reach. I spend very little time. Markarth, to me in the past, has always been just one of my least favorite cities to go to. There was something about it I just didn't like, so I never spend much time up there. But
I've heard a
you
lot
know,
of people say that.
when you dive into it from kind of that perspective that you did with the passage, or that kind of a mindset, it completely turns that area into a whole different view.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it differently.
Right. And if you're clever enough and creative enough to find a way to connect those different Forsworn camps together into a cohesive role play or a story, you're certainly clever enough then to do it in places like the Rift.
Sure.
There's no reason at all why you couldn't go to the Rift and find a way to connect all those disparate groups of bandits into a single organization that you can fight.
Sure.
Right? So to me, there's a lot of opportunity in the Reach, but you can extend the approach just about anywhere. So in essence, that's part of what I was trying to do with my strategy around Ashes, with the idea that there's some outside force that's infecting people, that's causing people to act out of their gourd, right? And act crazy.
Right.
It sort of explains why all these different groups of bandits are so intent on killing you upon sight, right? I mean, they
Yes,
literally,
they are.
all you got to do is glimpse a bandit and they will rush you. They will rush you without hesitation. They won't. There's only a couple
At least you know their
in
intentions.
game that will try to extort money from you. The rest will try to murder you immediately. And to me, that's reminiscent of sort of an apocalyptic zombie kind of story, right?
Right. Something's.
I still feel that way with most of my characters. No matter what happens, I'm being rushed to be murdered.
There's a lot of murder going on in Skyrim, but
Are bandits hostile to Forsworn?
I think they are.
Yeah, I believe they are.
Yeah,
'cause
they
they're
will
different
fight one
factions.
another.
But who isn't going to be hostile to Forsworn if their intent, in most cases, is to eradicate those who are not Forsworn? I mean, they sort of bring it on themselves, right?
Kind of self-fulfilling.
Right. Right. Oh, well, if only you'd be nice.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Whack, whack. Right.
Well,
What's that whole, retribution for killing my brother kind of attitude? It just, this nasty cycle that just never ends, because
Right.
you're always avenging somebody.
Right.
And they're always avenging somebody.
Well, I think the interesting thing to me about this discussion is the Forsworn is a great example. But again, I think
You can apply that.
we can extend this to all areas
Sure.
of the game, right?
This one seems particularly complex because of the nature of the background of the Forsworn, though. And
Well,
if we get back
and-
to some of the aesthetic pieces of
Right.
it, there's not the same kind of mod approach that you can take maybe about creating your character in a way that allows you to play it as if the Forsworn were something other than Forsworn, unless you're starting to disguise to infiltrate or whatever else. I'm just thinking about how would I try to play it. I would have a hard time, but I think that the approach that you guys have would totally something that you can try, which I think would be great.
Yeah, I think it's a good place to start, too.
Are there others like Forsworn that you would see having similar types of challenges, other characters, factions, groups in game that
Well,
you can try to play?
Bandits.
Bandits are another one.
Bandits is one. Necromancers is another.
Yep.
There's enclaves of necromancers all
Yep.
over the place that you can deal with.
Yeah, they're another
Right.
one that'll try to send you to oblivion on site
Yeah, right. Those are probably the big three, right?
that I can think of off the top of my head.
Vampires you could probably
yeah,
lump in as a
if you
fourth
wanna-
group, I suppose.
Yeah. Yep.
But I mean, the same rules apply. The thing I like about the Forsworn is that you could use the Forsworn as a jumping off point, right? Where maybe your objective is to take over that organization, and then once you do that, spread your influence, right? So you're using those skills in infiltration to go outside of the Reach now and try to infiltrate other cities and impact the government, influence the Civil War,
Right.
take over the underworld, blah, blah. You know, I mean, you can kind of branch off, you know,
Yeah.
in a bazillion different directions
Sure.
there. But yeah.
I like how
don't
simply
know.
and quickly you're taking over the world.
Well, it was kind of funny because when I was creating the passage, I got to that point where I was at episode 42, and I had literally raided every single Forsworn camp there was to raid, and I thought, shit, I need a new enemy, man. I need a new. I got to move. I
Nobody
need a new
left.
enemy, right? And it took some work for me to sort of engineer who my new enemy was going to be, because the Forsworn are just so damn convenient, so in your
So
face.
we had to swear off the Forsworn.
Oh, yeah. Is there Forsworn? Is there post-sworn?
Just sworn.
Anti-sworn?
Just sworn. Yeah.
Sworn?
Sworn.
Didn't you do a Let's Play of that game?
Sworn?
Sworn?
No.
No, okay.
Sounds
yet.
like, but very different.
It sounds like corn, but it's not corn.
It's not cool.
So I don't know. That I think that's... I'm done.
Cool approach, but
Since when?
it launched us into 45 minutes of cool conversation.
Yes.
We're talking about Forsworn, and you can talk about bandits, and you can talk about other people who are saying werewolf clans and
Yeah.
other things like that. I would love to hear back from other people on Facebook or feedback on the website what they've decided to do with this.
Yep.
And if Zephyr jumps back in and lets us know if any
Yeah.
of this
What-
has
what-
helped guide the next steps of his playthrough, his playthrough,
Right.
her playthrough, I would love to know.
Yeah, I think there are so many ways that you could approach the organization, and some of them are going to be a bit more difficult than others. But I think, again, if you figure out what your base mod is you're going to use to get into that faction, whether it's alternate start, or what was the other one?
Skyrim Unbound.
Skyrim Unbound. Use that as the base, and then depending on what type of character you want to play, choose other mods that set the stage for you.
Right, to complement
Mm-hmm.
your idea.
And then psychologically, just be thinking about what your character's approach is to the organization. Is this an organization that has hurt you and your family in some way and you're out for revenge? Is it an organization that you believe in but feel like they've gone down the wrong path and you want to fix?
Yeah.
Is it an organization that kidnapped you as a child and you were raised with them but aren't sure you believe in what they
Right.
believe, right? You've
Right.
been indoctrinated and now you're kind of snapping out of it or whatever.
I mean, shoot, you could be the only elf in the Forsworn
Yes.
camp.
Yeah. I mean, it could be some crazy thing like that. And you can literally start your Forsworn adventure pretty much anywhere you want. I mean, from the beginning, or you could use the whole Sidna Mine side quest as a way to sort of kick off your whole Forsworn focused
Sure.
thing, whatever it is.
And
So-
I mean, you can grab some different quest mods out there. They don't have to be specific to the faction that you're trying to manipulate. Make it work for you.
Well,
Yep.
for the folks who were asking, I did put a link to the Skyrim character build Raven, Lady of the Reach, in the chat. We'll try to make sure that we add that in with show notes later on during the week as well.
We'll try.
It's only about 14 or 15 minutes long, so jump in there. I'm going to be doing that again. Again, it was published Oh, actually, last May. So it is
Going on a year.
falling through the back parts of the box of my head. So
Long in the tooth.
long
that
in the
way.
tooth. But I don't think that the character build is any different now. Probably a really very good launching point for anybody looking at that. So awesome.
Well, everybody, hey, thank you so much for attending. We are hitting the end here. We're coming up on about 40 minutes. So what we're going to do next is Tom is going to be joining us any minute now, and we're going to reset the room. So what we're going to do is pause the live stream, and we will relaunch it promptly, hopefully, at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, and we will begin some classic tabletop RPG action with Pathfinder and Freeport, City of Adventure.
So in the meantime, get a drink, get some food, take a break, come back, watch Raven, Lady of the Reach, and watch for us to relaunch the stream.
Perfect. Great suggestion.
And send us feedback and questions like the one that Zephyr sent. We love to address folks' questions, problems.
Please, send us in questions. Go to charactercrusade.com and you will find a link to our contact form at the bottom of every page on that site. Feel free to send us questions and we may address your question in an episode of this podcast. Thank you all very much, and we will see you in 15 short minutes.
Later.
Bye.